Welcome to the GrayHawk DJC podcast. In today's podcast, we talk with Mike Gould, a professional product designer. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Dave?
Pretty good. Thanks for coming to the show.
Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it.
All right. That's awesome. How about we start off and you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you grew up, and let the viewers get to see you and get to know you a little bit.
Okay. Family is originally from the West Coast, Santa Cruz area, but moved out to Texas when I was really young. So Texas I'm pretty much a Texan.
Okay.
Grew up in Louisville, went to Louisville High School, and then graduated and went to UNT.
Okay.
And went through their communication design. Well, originally went in as an accounting major and took a figure drawing class because I've always drawn. I've always built little models. Star Wars was a big influence on me when I was a little kid, like it was to a lot of kids our age,
right.
And got me really into wanting to get more into creative executions of things. So I started by building little models and drawing Star Wars characters and stuff, and pretty soon I had a whole collection of ships that I built from just about every one of the movies. Just old cardboard I find, and tape and hot glue and markers and all kinds of stuff, trying to get as close as I possibly could. But didn't take any art classes in high school because I thought it was kind of wasteful, because I wanted to take as much math and as much science as I could, because I was, I decided back then I was going to be an accountant.
What made you decide to be an accountant, you think?
Money. If I couldn't make the money, at least I could handle the money.
Right.
And decide where the money was going to go. Bad foresight, I guess, on my part, but.
Were you influenced by your parents, you think, or
no, not really?
No, you just thought accounting was your thing.
Yeah, I just thought, be an accountant. If you not the one making the money, at least you're one maybe controlling the money.
Right.
So I'm in my, I think, third or fourth semester in the accounting program, and I take a figure drawing class for one of my electives.
Okay.
And it's like, figure drawing, I think, is like the first drawing class of the second year of the design program. And I didn't want to take drawing 1 or drawing 2, so I already know how to draw. But the thing about, design programs at colleges is, you may think you're the good in your little small town. You can draw the best Star Wars character from where you are, but you get to college and they break you down.
Right.
It's a little bit like boot camp. Yeah, you can draw, but you're not drawing right. We're going to teach you how to draw. Right.
Plus, there are a lot of other great artists there too, right?
Yeah, there were a lot of other good people, but it soon became really clear that, I said, okay, I can adapt. I can do this, and really learning how to draw their way was more like sculpting with, whatever medium you were using and the paper. And that's really was kind of an aha moment in drawing for me, is that, it's not just drawing a bunch of disconnected lines together in hopes that, you get a pretty picture. You can sculpt your way via whatever the implement is and the paper into narrowing it down into perfectly what you want to get. So that was a real quick aha that wasn't coming as quickly to some of the other kids. And I had a graduate student as a professor, and he was a really cool guy. And he would whenever we had to turn around and show everybody what we'd been working on for the past hour, he'd always spend a lot of time, on my stuff. And then one day, probably the third or fourth week into the class, he said, "Hey, I know everybody else's major, but what's yours?" I go, "Accounting." And he goes, "No, it can't be accounting. Come on." And his mother was British and his dad was from Houston, but he'd been raised mostly in Texas. So he was kind of funny. He went to boarding schools in England for many years, but for some reason had never lost his accent, his Texas accent. He was really funny to talk to, because I knew that he had this really great education and, had a lot of really great international experiences under his belt, but he was just kind of a good old boy that drew pictures.
Yeah.
And he convinced me, he said, "Well, if it's money you're worried about, then there's medical illustration, which pays a whole lot. The only problem is you're only really a few hours short of actually being a doctor in most cases through some of those medical illustration programs. And you do have to look at the stuff to draw it. And some people who can't handle that stuff, it might be kind of rough, but it does pay an awful lot. And then there's graphic design, and then there's advertising. And I go, well, tell me more about this. And so he got me a meeting with the director of the design or the design communication program or communication design program at UNT. And I was like, yeah, okay.
So prior to this, you had not known about becoming an artist or a graphic designer? Yep.
Didn't know that it was something. I knew that we had an art building at UNT, but I just looked at all the people going in and out and thinking, oh, what are you going to do when you graduate? You're going to have a degree that's not going to allow you to do much of anything. Not the case. Not the case. It was a really, UNT's art school is a really tight-knit, very connected place.
Right.
And even the fine arts graduates get such a great education, not only in execution of artwork and a whole background in art, but in the business aspects of it too, because a lot of the adjunct teachers there are professional artists. And a couple of my teachers would break down for us the economics of studio time, cost of supplies, all these different things, and how that went into determining the price of whatever artwork it was that they were hanging in galleries. I had quite a few teachers that that was their main income, and they were just teaching because they wanted to pass on some of this knowledge to some of the kids.
Right.
But it was eye-opening, and I'm glad. I wish I remember what his name was. Go back and visit him or get in touch with him, because I'd like to say thanks for changing things. He probably kept me from, becoming a really angry old accountant.
So this, you said this was your second year at UNT?
My second year.
So when did you make the final switch to go to the art school, I guess?
Like right after that class.
Right. Okay.
Like right at the end of that semester is when it changed over.
Okay.
The good thing was a lot of the classes that I had taken in the business program either translated to elective credits or some other credits that I needed. So luckily I got with a good counselor in the art building that said, oh yeah, we can make this work for this and this work for that. So it didn't put me really behind, maybe 3-6 hours behind, but not by very much.
Okay. And any regrets when you made the change? Were you scared? Did you think you made a mistake, or were you like, this is awesome and I want to go full force?
Only years afterwards, when I had to deal with particularly prickly account service people on occasion. That's the only time there's ever really been regret. It's like,
but when you were at UNT, this is what your calling was. You felt it right away.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I really did feel it. I was like, wow, this kind of found me. Thank goodness for this graduate student teaching my figure drawing 1 class, because he basically helped me change the course of
your life, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much.
So you come out with a degree in fine arts at UNT? Was it graphic design?
Yeah, it's a BFA in communication design.
Okay.
It's not really graphic design. Graphic design has always been kind of that, it's felt a little trade school.
Okay.
Not that there's anything wrong with trade school.
Right.
Turns out a lot of great people. I've worked with a lot of people who are incredibly talented that have come from trade schools, but I think they changed the title of the degree because it was more collegiate. It felt more university-ish than just saying, I got a degree in graphic design.
Okay.
And there were a couple of different programs. One was you could go through and get a concentration in art direction, or go through and get a concentration in graphic design, more head down type of stuff, or a writer. We popped out quite a few writers.
Okay.
We even had a couple girls that after being designers for a couple of years decided, hey, I'm really a much better writer, and kind of abandoned graphic design and became writers. I've always been kind of an amateurish writer when it comes to creative. I know a good line when I hear it, but it takes me a little bit longer to get there than it would for somebody who does it all the time.
Right.
I've kind of been an irritant to a lot of writer partners in the past, because sometimes I'm just like, this doesn't sound right. It's not been a matter of, hey, you got too many words in this headline, it won't fit. Can you cut it down? No, none of that kind of stuff. It's always been, this isn't really capturing the brand essence as much as I think it should. Let's rework it. So I've worked with a few writers that, everything they do, just beautiful, popped it right out. It's great, fantastic, fits, perfect. And I've worked with some writers that, maybe it's arrogance on my part, but I feel like I need to jump in a little bit and help out and, kind of guide them a little bit more. And it hasn't necessarily been junior people. Sometimes it's been somebody that should have been a little bit more seasoned, need a little bit more guidance. But that's what you do when you partner up with a writer. I mean, ideally, what you're supposed to do in creative is, art director, writer, partner up together, come up with a concept. A lot of times the art director will feel like they're the one doing most of the work, because it's usually them staying late, putting together the layout, this, that, or the other. But I've never really discounted the contributions of the writer, because I always feel like, the writer, if they're even remotely close to what I'm thinking, they can't turn it off. Because I know I can't turn it off. It's always on. They might be on their way home, driving on their way home after work one day, they go, oh, should have been a preposition here, or should have been a comma here, or this would have been a much better word, or did I make that headline more high-minded or more elevated or more educated than it needed to be for the target market? They're constantly, it's like that all the time. And for me, it's like that, but it's more of a visual thing. I can't go down the road without looking at a sign, or looking at some sort of graphic that's meant to grab your attention, billboard, whatnot, something on the side of a truck, without worried about the kerning on the letters, or is that the right color, or that really needs to be repainted, or I wonder who they use to get that vinyl, because it looks like crap or it looks really good. It's just it's impossible for me to turn it off.
So you're out of UNT. Tell us about your work history and how you got into the industry then. Yep.
Well, when I was coming out, it was like the tail end of mechanical artwork.
Okay.
Like, I did maybe a couple of mechanicals, but I don't remember enough about them to really talk in great detail about them, because the Macs were really starting to invade everything. And
so when you say mechanical, you're physically drawing,
mechanical artwork, where we used illustration boards, and then we used amber lith and ruby lith, which are the clear plastic you see with the amber color that you carve out with like a little knife of like areas of color.
Oh wow! And this is all freehand.
And ordered type galleys from typesetting places. There were a few when I got out of school. There were still a few of those guys around. And then take the type, wax your board, stick the type down, and if your leading wasn't right, you had to cut each line perfectly and then spread them out just by hand. That kind of old school craziness. Only had to do it a couple times.
So you weren't trained on computers then, or were you?
When I was in school, I got. We didn't have a highly developed formal plan to learn how to use things like or back then it was freehand and what was it, page layout, PageMaker, because they weren't at the level. Those two programs I don't think were at the level that there was really that great professional adoption out there in the industry just yet. Quark Express was just starting to kind of get off the ground and become the page layout program of choice, and Illustrator was just starting to overtake freehand as the vector illustration program, And Photoshop was great, but it was just sort of an oddity because with those earlier versions of Photoshop, like before 2.5, every time you did something in Photoshop, you'd have to save a file of what you did. And it's like, okay, I need to airbrush somebody's cheek there's a little too much red in it. Okay, do that, save that. And so you'd have like, you'd fill up your hard drive like immediately with all of these different versions, because Photoshop didn't have a delete. It didn't have a Command-Z on it at all. So you had to save everything that you did, no matter what. Yeah. Okay. Not until I think it was 2.5 did they have that function in it.
So was it hard for you to make the transition to more digital as you became
because when I was in school, I was going to like all these little kind of, I wouldn't say fringe computer labs, but like not really well-known computer labs on the campus. And I was training myself on PageMaker and freehand and learning about fonts and learning about storage. So when I did my first couple of internships, it was like, hopping on the computer and, they were amazed. I go, this kid from school, we need to typeset this and send it to Creative Type and, have them send something, send us back a type. Okay, give it to me. Yep. I interned for an illustration company in Southlake, and then interned for a couple of small design studios. Mm-hmm. And, each time it was like, hey, can you do this on the, here, give it, and, hop on the computer and just start doing it. The only problem was at these internships, I had things like Quark Express and Illustrator and Photoshop. And then when I went back to school, these computer labs, I had to jump back on freehand and PageMaker, which were like lesser versions of these other two. So it was a little.
Did you face that when you first got your first job? Like it was a complete different experience from school? What was the biggest, difference then for you when you started working in the industry?
It really wasn't too horrible, because the experience I got in my internships laid the groundwork for me being able to just jump right in. Okay. As soon as there was a need to have something done.
So what was your first job experiences like then? Give us what was your day like, I guess?
Well, the first job I got, I had it in my head that I didn't need my degree, and that I had gotten connected inside the Dallas market well enough to be able to, get a job wherever I wanted. And I went to work for this guy. I don't want to say his name, because he was rough, unnecessarily rough to work with. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced before, but he had come up through, his lineage through the industry was one of those that, survival of the fittest sort of graphic design or creative scenarios. And he had come up through RBM&M, and before that, Richards Group, before RBM&M was kind of a thing. And his upbringing through the industry right out of school was rough. So that's all he knew. That was the only teaching method.
Was this an agency of his?
It was a small design studio.
Okay.
And I took about all of him that I possibly could. And I'm just, life can't be like this. Right. So I began to look for another job. And just down the hall from the building that we were in was an advertising agency that needed another art director. And so I said, one day I was riding the elevator down to the parking garage with the owner of that company. I said, hey, I saw that you guys are looking for an art director. He goes, yay, when do you want to start?
Okay.
You don't even know me. You go, yeah, but I know that you work for the guy that I was working for at the time. And one of the people that I'd interned with was just down the hall too.
Okay.
So he said, both of these guys say great things about you. So, I'm surprised they're going to let you go or allow you to leave. And I go, well, I don't know if that's going to be such a pleasant experience. And he said, well, tell you what, don't make me angry, because I ride up and down the elevator with these guys too, or this one guy, and I don't want to make him mad. So give him a 2-week notice, and tell him that you want to come and work for me, and he can't be mad at you because you're giving him a 2-week notice. And so I did, and went to work for this small advertising agency, and it was small, regional. But the one cool thing that they did have was the Dallas Stars account. The Dallas Stars were just starting out, and was it Prime Star Television, which was one of the precursors to like DirecTV and EchoStar. I think it was EchoStar. I can't remember. There were a few upstart satellite TV companies that were trying to get away from that great big honking dish that people would have installed in their backyard to more of a uniform kind of thing that we see today with DirecTV, and I always forget what the name of the other one is.
So most of your experience, has it been with agencies, or have you worked on
most of the experience has been with agencies.
But you've also worked on the company client side too, right?
Really, when you work on the client side, the experience that I got, it's like working in an agency format, because it kind of models itself after that, but it's a little bit slower. It's a little bit more. So when I started out, everything was churn and burn, fast as you can, late nights, weekends, get it done at all costs. And then when you go and you work in-house somewhere, it's like, looks like it's about 4:30, time to kind of kick back and where's the beer cart?
Right.
Who's rolling it around today? It was like, it was really weird. It was strange getting used to working in an in-house environment as opposed to working in an agency.
What's your preference, you think?
I really don't know. Both of them have their pros and cons. I mean, you can get some working at the pace that you do in an advertising agency or a design studio. You can get some really beautiful work. You can get some really good stuff, because sometimes sweat and desperation and deadlines are a great recipe for, filling your portfolio with good stuff.
Right.
Sometimes if you're given too much time and, not a great amount of direction and, the deadlines are kind of lax, sometimes you just become lax. You settle into that environment. You can see after a while the work is not what you're used to doing.
And you've also done freelance work too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is that a different ball game as well?
Freelance can be a different beast depending on what you want to make of it. If you want to be really aggressive with it, yeah. If you want to, just chill out and take on this project or that, it really depends on if you're going to go in-house or they're going to allow you to work at home, or just what the scenario is going to be.
Right.
It's different every time. It's not a uniform experience.
Right. So give us some examples of projects you've had on the client side, at agencies or freelance, that you've done over the years that are memorable for you. What made them memorable? Some war stories, I guess.
One of the war stories was at the beginning, sort of the beginning of the .com era. I think it was 98 or 99. Was working on a new interface for the American Airlines website, and working for a place called Luminant Worldwide, and working with a few other designers on this project. And I think we're like 3 or 4 months into it, and we're presenting front page designs, back when we called it the front page design.
So homepage, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
you definitely call it homepage now, but back then it was like they were treating it more like an online version of the American Way magazine. It was more lifestyle and destination oriented on the front page, more of kind of like a table of contents splash page of a travel magazine. And booking flight was like the main menu option, book a flight.
Right.
But it wasn't the central focus. So that's how we approached it. This was going to be, basically.
Was this the requirement that the client wanted?
Yeah, this was the requirements. Of course, they want, book a flight to be the first menu option on there. So, people is top of mind. And I believe we were about to go out and begin focus grouping 5 or 6 different executions of a home page, and I think a main page, and like maybe a booking page. We're going to go to Miami and Newark, and then back to Dallas and do focus groups. I think it was 2 or 3 days before that, Southwest Airlines went live with their brand new site, and they had the booking engine front and center, right on the main page, right in your face. Book a flight, right there. And that was a huge game changer, because United, Delta, American, everybody else that was out there, nobody had their booking engine front and center right in the face of the user. It was, Southwest Airlines, like, we're selling flights, so that should be the central focus. And it showed, and they did it really well. It wasn't tacky or anything like that, but it was like it was business. Right. Let's get to business. And they were all business about it.
How did the folks at American react to that?
We actually called them and said, have you guys seen the news? We think we're going to have to do some re-maneuvering around what we're working on for you guys, because this is a game changer. We're like in awe. We're like, such a simple solution, just like, right there in front of your face. Why didn't we come up with it? And so we had to, like, in the span of a couple of days, like, redo. Luckily, it wasn't like awful reimagining of like all the different interface concepts that we had, but now the booking engine was central focus right on the front page.
Oh wow!
And that was way back in the beginnings of the online world, and that was we had several people working on the project that was our first online, that was our first digital project, that was our first UI that they'd ever done, because at that point in digital creative, it was very difficult to get creatives that had any experience with digital. And there weren't very many of us around. There were only a few. I got lucky and got into it a little, probably starting in my 97, 98, I started getting into it. So I knew my way around it. Wasn't writing code, but I knew the limitations. And one of the big ones was IE3. There was a lot of stuff that all of us wanted to do. We'd see all these great websites that had this or that going on, but the reality was that the market share for the IE3 browser was still like 86, 90, 85, 90%. So everything had to be designed within the limits of whatever IE3 could handle. So a lot of times that meant a lot of dreams and hopes were dashed on the rocks of IE3 limitations.
Oh, Microsoft.
Where was I going with that story? I think I had a kernel of a thought on that one, but
you were just telling war stories. Like, what about that particular project you think was most memorable? Then was it the pivot because of Southwest?
It was the aha pivot. It was the epiphany pivot. That's like, it went from designing brochureware to this is hardcore e-commerce. Damn it!
Yeah,
this is what this shit's about.
Right.
We're trying to sell some stuff here. It was a game changer.
Was it hard to make the pivot since you had already worked?
What was hard is us being hard on ourselves for not seeing that and not being the ones to have solved that problem. It was like why didn't we come up with that?
Right.
That was the toughest part of that.
Right.
But it was like a switch that got turned on. Okay, that's what this is about.
Right. Absolutely. So describe to us, like, because I'm sure there's people watching this that are going to think about becoming
and laughing at my funny beard
or going into graphic designing. What's your typical day like or week like? Describe what a workload is, how you process information, get things out, what a graphic designer does, I guess.
Well, it sounds counterproductive, but ideally you have several projects going on at the same time.
Okay.
A lot of people say, well, how do you juggle them all? Well, for a creative person, being able to bounce from one thing to another and, get loose ends on this project tied up and then send it off for an approval. proof this and send it into editing, or send it into editing to get the proof, and then send it back. Begin this job, kick off this job, okay, wrap up this job. You never know what one thing from one client is going to do to influence something that you're working on somewhere else. Mm-hmm. There might be efficiencies that go into some things that a light will turn on in your head and go, oh, I could do this here, or hey, we did this once for this, but this will work great over here. So having several things going on all at the same time is actually a better thing than having one project that you're plodding along on, mm-hmm. trying to get progress on. I like having multiple things going on at the same time. I like dealing with multiple graphic standards and different clients, because sometimes, if you're working on a financial client, or you're working on a healthcare client, or you're working on a travel client, or you're working on an entertainment client, you're thinking, these are all different things. What connective tissue is uniting all of these things, mm-hmm. if anything at all? But a lot of times there's quite a few things that connect all those projects, or one thing influences another, and you never know where there's sparks. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's little hidden sparks of influence and ideas everywhere, no matter where you're looking in all the various projects that you're working on.
Right.
You got to be open to seeing where all those little different sparks of ingenuity or ideas are. And that's why I like working on a bunch of different things at the same time, mm-hmm. and not just the same thing over and over and over again.
How much of your time is spent doing the actual work, as opposed to maybe, are you pitching at presentations, setting up processes, versus like actual design work, I guess?
Ideally, you would love to have like 50 to 75% of your day of you ideating and creating. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, sometimes you may only get 20 or 30% of your day. The mm-hmm. rest is managing expectations, or like what you just said, pitching, mm-hmm. or doing revisions to something, trying to sew little details up, or communication, or meetings, or all the different things that go into the support of just a regular project.
Right.
What a lot of people think when they're in school is, yeah, I'm going to be at my drawing table or my computer all day long making beautiful things, mm-hmm. and changing the world, and people are going to look at my stuff and go, who was that genius that designed that?
Right.
Well, yeah, go for it if you can find something like that. But a lot of times your day is filled with helping to manage the project, helping to move things along. And, if you can crank out, 20 to 30% of design time in the course of a day, then that's a good day. But if you're really having a great day, it's 50 to 70%
right,
of your day
right.
is not having to deal with emails, or not having to deal with phone calls, or not having to deal with somebody who's behind on the project and needs a refresher and needs to be caught up. And it's like, a lot of times you'll see on projects that you may think you're the only one that really has a care in the world about a project, because everybody else is just kind of like drinking coffee, having conversations, doing silly stuff, and not have their eye focused on the ball and getting the project done, or getting good work out to the client.
Right.
That's what it's all about, trying to get the best possible product out.
So I've actually looked over your shoulder and seen you design. And what's fascinating is just how quick and
it looks like monkeys playing with a football, doesn't it?
No, I'm shocked at how quick and fast it is as you go through the process, right? So how hard is it to keep up with the technology? Has that ever been an issue?
No.
Or learning it, I guess.
There were times that I was put on a project and I was told, you're gonna learn how to use this software, mm-hmm. or you're gonna learn how to use this, and a lot of times that ends up just becoming vapor. It's some fly-by-night program that you just had to use because it was part of the project in some capacity. But what it boils down to is I'm using a majority of what I'm using day to day now is XD and a little bit of Figma and a little bit of Sketch. Not as much as I'd like to, but it's really funny how close all these programs are. When I open Figma or I open Sketch, I'm just like, sometimes I forget that I don't have XD open because I think they've all gone to a very similar palette and tool structure that's very intuitive. So the crossover between them all, I think you can go into any operation and they say, well, do you use Figma, Sketch, or XD? And it looks like XD is beginning to be the last one that they mention. It's always Figma because of the you can share across multiple users and people can all work on it at the same time, which sometimes is a good thing, sometimes is a bad thing. Sometimes you don't want people messing with your stuff, but sometimes that's the collaboration on Figma is great. I don't know enough about Sketch to know about the collaboration on it, but you're well aware of the collaboration we experience with XD. It's not to the degree I think that Figma and Sketch are, but it suits our purposes. And then Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign very infrequently. And then the bane of all art directors or all creatives' existence, PowerPoint. Okay. But actually, PowerPoint you can do some fun stuff in PowerPoint. I mean, if you go in knowing what your expectations are, knowing what you want to do, you can actually make some PowerPoint stuff actually kind of beautiful.
That's right. I know some very good PowerPoint users, and they do great stuff.
And I'm not. It's been a long time since I've done any print work, but it's like a wrench in my toolbox that has a little bit of dust on it. But as soon as I wipe that dust off, it's like full bore right back into it. Right. So, you just have to remember CMYK and not RGB.
What is, do you think, the biggest change since when you first started to now? Has it been the technology, or is it something else, I guess?
I think it's got to be the technology. I think when digital assets and user experience and product development became hot, print still exists. Print will always be around. Print is not going anywhere. Print still serves a useful purpose, and it still is a hardy, vibrant industry and creative execution method. But face it, we're on our little phones and we're on our TVs when we get home. We're also got our tablets right next to us when we're watching our TVs at home, and probably got the phone not too far away. We're digital people. Yep. All the creative executions are coming in through these devices into our heads, and so that's what a lot of the creative executions are. So for the kids coming out of school who've never had to manually do anything, the kids coming out of school are different these days. They grew up with all this stuff. They grew up with a phone in their hands. Yep. Or anyone that's watching this and wants to get into the industry, what's your tips and advice for what kind of tool set they need? First, things that they need to know as far as the actual programs, but also mindset, attitude, all that stuff. What would you advise someone, or what's your checklist of items that you think someone needs to be successful? I really haven't confronted, resistance to doing hard work like a lot of people will say younger kids do. Okay. With my son and his set of friends, they're all extremely hard workers. Okay. There's none of this, I don't know what his generation is now called, but, I hear bad things about millennials, just in passing. I really have never paid too much attention to the comments about, not willing to do hard work. But creative is hard work. Coming up with good creative ideas that work within the confines of whatever your specifications and requirements are for the project it's hard work to come up with that. And in my work history, I've only met a few people who are just sloth turtle, disinterested, and you don't last very long with that kind of an attitude. Everybody that I've ever worked with is a rabbit, a hummingbird, a cheetah, a jaguar. They're all mostly, for the most part, good people, and willing to put in the work and willing to put in the effort that it takes to come up with good creative. That's really the single greatest tool you need, is the willingness to get the work done. You can pick up Photoshop or Illustrator or InDesign or Figma, Sketch, XD, After Effects, any kind of video editing software. But the main tool, the biggest, most shiniest tool in your toolbox needs to be the willingness to do hard work tool.
All right. Well, Mike, I think we'll end it there.
Okay.
Thank you for all this information. I've been fascinated with the way you do your work. So,
well, thanks.
This was a really good interview, and
I'm always happy to show you my stuff too.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. This was great.
Cool. Thank you, Dave.